happy to welcome California Congressman Robert Garcia, ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. So what I'd hoped to hear was Congressman Walkinshaw, who wants to know a few things. He said there'd been reporting by the Miami Herald that he was paying protection payments to prison guards. This, of course, referencing Jeffrey Epstein. It is unproven, but I think that's an important line of questioning to understand what happened and what went wrong here. Is that the kind of thing you want to ask? And what else do you want to ask in terms of questions of this person you'll be interviewing?
I mean, that's absolutely correct. Look, I think first it's really important to put things in perspective. Obviously, there have been two different investigations done by the DOJ that were conclusive from their perspective that this was a suicide. At the same time, I think we just got to be very honest that this whole investigation and the entire case around Jeffrey Epstein there's been so much controversy. There's been so much deception that I think it's important that we take a serious look around the events that led to his death. And there have been so many inconsistencies around what the actual guards actually knew, possible payments that were being received, missing camera footage that we know has been widely reported. And there have been others, including independent experts, that have looked at both photographs, evidence, that have come to a different conclusion. And so this is a moment, I think, for oversight to do the right thing, ask the right questions. And if we can get more information about whether it was payments, which I think would be quite alarming, whether anyone else had actually come to visit Jeffrey Epstein, those are the kind of questions that we want to ask.
And this week you said that the committee is moving forward with plans to obtain additional Epstein records that the DOJ has yet to share with Congress or the public. What kind of files do you think are still missing, and how many?
Look, we think that actually about half of the files are still missing, which is outrageous. I mean, 50% likely of the entire batch of files is still in the possession of the DOJ. And there's really no legal reason for them to be holding those. There's a subpoena in place and a law in place. And the subpoena makes it very clear that all documents need to be given to the United States Congress. So the fact that they're likely withholding critical information and possibly about co-conspirators, other powerful men who were involved, other people in Epstein's circle. And we know they've already held and essentially played games with documents about President Trump. There were allegations made, of course, about the president from a survivor that are quite serious. Now, they are allegations, but why were those removed and then put back into the files? And still, yet not all the documents are there. So these are the kinds of questions about this White House cover-up that we need answered, which is why it's so important now that Pam Bondi has been deposed by our committee and will be in front of us to answer these questions.
And on Wednesday, Epstein's longtime accountant, Richard Kahn, testified before the Oversight Committee. How revealing was his testimony? And what prompted you and Ro Khanna to send a letter to his lawyer saying Kahn gave contradictory and concerning statements about one of the victims?
Yeah, this was very concerning to us. Look, Mr. Kahn obviously had been Jeffrey Epstein's a longtime accountant and did a lot of his finances. The fact that at the start of the interview, he essentially said that, yes, there was a payment that was made to a survivor and accuser that accused Trump of some pretty serious abuse, that there was some sort of settlement that was made. That was Kahn's position. Then later in the deposition, his lawyers clarified and changed his position, saying, no, there was no actual payment. And then later on, a third time, they changed their position again and then said that they couldn't confirm or deny if the Epstein estate had actually produced any kind of settlement for someone who had accused Trump of alleged abuse. Now, this is the same abuse, by the way, that we have referenced in the actual Epstein files.
Right now, an investigation is underway in New Mexico at the sprawling property once owned by Jeffrey Epstein. On Monday, the state conducted its first search of the Zorro Ranch, where Epstein is accused of sexually assaulting young girls. It comes after New Mexico lawmakers last month created a bipartisan commission to probe potential Epstein crimes neglected by federal investigators. And joining me now is the lawmaker who co-led the passage of the Epstein Truth Commission, New Mexico State Representative Andrea Romero. Andrea, welcome. Let's talk about Monday's search. You called it the search of this 7,600-acre property, a massive development toward uncovering Epstein's crimes. What can you tell us about any evidence seized and how this investigation will proceed and when the public might expect a report?
So it's the first of its kind that we know about an investigation that's happened on the ranch. It's massive because it's the first time law enforcement has gone to this place to investigate these crimes. What we know is that this wasn't just one day, and it wasn't just in one space. This land spans very broadly. We're talking about a 30,000 square foot area of just the ranch home alone. And then we're thinking beyond that, we're talking about public lands, private lands. And so, the scope of this is so big for our Department of Justice, but nevertheless, we know it took multiple days. I don't know if it's actually ended yet. Just Thursday, I had a journalist say they had been there, saying the Department of Justice was still guarding the ranch gates. And so we will learn from them about what happened. The Truth Commission has a relationship with our Department of Justice to understand what they find and how we can use that information.
What is it they're looking for?
Well, we know that the FBI had received a tip in 2019 that there may have been bodies buried at the ranch. When we heard that understanding and got that message that the Department of Justice had released just weeks ago, that is when our New Mexico Department of Justice sprung into action to create this criminal investigation 3 days after our commission was launched. We did not know the timing of this was going to be simultaneous with the work of our commission, but now we have multiple agencies working in tandem to ensure that we know what went on there.
Bodies of who is it alleged would be there?
Bodies of girls who were strangulated during fetish sex. This was the tip offered to the FBI in 2019 that a then radio host here in New Mexico had received from an anonymous person. It's redacted in the files. We understand that that person may have been a worker at the ranch at the time that tipped off this radio host to then forward that to the FBI to say, this needs to be investigated. Again, this was in 2019. This was never investigated. This never transpired. And in fact, when the New Mexico Department of Justice Attorney General wanted to investigate, the federal government said, stand down. So we don't know why that decision was made. Here we are 7 years later. It's horrifying to think that occurred. We won't know that until the New Mexico Department of Justice lets us know what they found, but we certainly want to know.
I'll bet. So this is a property, again, Jeffrey Epstein going on 7 years now, being dead. The property has passed hands, correct? And there's been construction. How confident are you that something will be found, notwithstanding potentially just digging up ground to see if these allegations of young girls being buried on the property are true?
Well, thankfully, we do have the full participation of the current owners to be able to run this type of investigation without having to subpoena, without having to go through the full force of law to get to that point. Again, construction, things that have happened when this property exchanged hands.
Right. In New Mexico, we're trying to turn those files into trials, right? Because it's not enough to have them released. And remember, half of them still haven't been released. There's 3 million files that have not been released. The redactions are preposterous. But what we need is we are thankful for the hard work journalists have been doing in terms of putting the pieces together. But we need investigators who have the authority to bring charges to be able to look at them and move forward. And so that's what we're doing in New Mexico. And this is what we should be doing at a national level. So New Mexico is showing the federal government what it should be doing. If we had a Department of Justice that was doing its job, they'd say we have files with credible allegations against a man who potentially killed a 14-year-old hitter, repeated credible interviews. We're going to do an investigation. We're going to see if there is any criminal wrongdoing here. That's just one of the references to President Trump. There are multiple references all over the files of potential criminal wrongdoing. That's not just about the sexual crimes, but also about the fraud and the financial crimes. And they're not doing anything. But here in New Mexico, we're going to take our Department of Justice and we're going to see what we can do.
It just keeps getting uglier and uglier. And this is going to ensnare Trump. The story isn't going away. And what more and more people are saying, including New Democratic Party Premier, NDP Premier Wab Kinew in Canada, just said, look, there's no actual reason why Trump is doing all these wars. What makes sense to me is that he's doing it to hide the files, to distract from the files. Right? Now, Mark Carney won't say that, unfortunately. Poilievre won't. Only the NDP is saying that in Canada because they're the party that fights for Canadians against the American capitalist elite. That's besides the point for now. But the point is, more and more people around the world are realizing it. Earlier today, I played you clips of a British politician saying very clearly Donald Trump is doing all of this, making enemies with his friends, all as a big distraction for the files. And that plays a specific significance in England and the United Kingdom because one of their members of their royal family is also embroiled in this, at least, in a sense. And so all of this together showcases that he wants to hide stuff, but new stuff comes out all the time. And now there's a new location of focus that should have probably been at the top of mind earlier, but it wasn't. I don't know why. I'm not an expert. But it seems to me that we're finally getting to it, and this could be dangerous to Trump and many other people. And the more people exposed, the more chances there are for people to throw one another under the bus. Whether it's criminally or even just socially. Like, no one necessarily is hit with charges on this, but they've been outed as being an associate of Jeff and Ghislaine, and to get the heat off them, they're like, oh, but I saw Trump there, or I saw that guy there, or I saw Bill Clinton there, or whatever, just as an example, because they're smaller fish. We've been talking about the island, obviously. There's been a lot of talk about his properties in Florida. There's been a lot of talk about his properties in New York, Jeffrey Epstein. But now we're finally getting to the ranch. One of his probably the property that's maybe the weirdest and most concerning in a lot of ways. And what's found there, I think, will rock the American right to its core.